All right, good morning, party people. January 17th. So, today we are in Amos for our Bible study, but for our daily reading, I almost didn't get to Amos today because the daily reading was so freaking awesome. Our daily reading is Isaiah 63:64, Amos 7:8, Revelation 17:18, Psalm 65 through 66, and then Proverbs 12, right? So that's our daily reading. So today, I still don't have any water, so I apologize for the appearance. Okay, so today in Amos chapter 6, we are, for those of you that have not seen any of my studies, I'm going to show you a map that shows you where Amos is on the timeline of Israel, so you kind of get a better idea of what's going on with him. So here is the nation of Israel. This is the northern kingdom. This is the southern kingdom. So after Solomon, the kingdoms were split. The northern kingdom was 10 tribes. They almost never followed God. They were a mess. The southern kingdom tried to follow God. Many of these guys did a great job. This is the line of Solomon. 2 tribes went to the south. 10 tribes went up here. This is the Davidic line. This is the Solomonic line. This is the line from which Jesus has his heritage, right? So here's little Amos. So Amos is a prophet that God sent from the southern kingdom. He was actually down here, and he went up to the northern kingdom. As you can see here, this line delineates the fall of the northern kingdom to Assyria. This line delineates the fall of the southern kingdom to Babylon. And then this is where Babylon comes into power. We see the story of Daniel, right? So here's little Amos. He's in between Jonah and Hosea. And God had sent him. He was just a sheep breeder. He wasn't trained prophetically. He was not trained Levitically. He was just someone who tended sheep. And God sent him up on a mission to the northern kingdom to call them out for what was about to happen if they didn't turn. So what's awesome about Amos is when he first goes up there, as we saw in the earlier chapters of Amos, he begins his prophecy by calling out 7 other nations around them, right? Including the kingdom of Judah, the southern kingdom where he was from. But then he turns his attention to Israel because that's why he was sent there. And Israel is a freaking mess. So Israel at this time had pushed back the boundaries of where they were. They had regained some of the conquered land that had been taken from them under through Syria and different little incursions from Assyria. The land was much bigger when it was a combined kingdom under Solomon and David. And so at this time, there in the southern kingdom, down here where he was from, there was a good king named Uzziah, and that's who was around at the same time. He was a good king during the same time frame as when Amos went up to the north. But the Jeroboam II was a good king in the idea that he was good strategically and militarily. He was able to really plan things out, rebuild, fortified, build up the military. So all of that stuff he did great. However, the nation was falling apart under him. The entire social structure was falling apart. They had 2 false temples up there where they were proclaiming to worship God when in fact they had brought in all these Canaanite practices. Temple prostitution was happening, although we've seen that in the past as well, but it was big time up there then. But all of the social structures were falling apart. The judges were allowing themselves to be bribed. The situations where the elders would gather at the gates to do justice for disputes within families, within tribes, whatever the disputes were, they were being polluted as well. They were not allowed to do what they were supposed to do. They were not being honored. All of the justice was being turned on its head. So the wealthier were getting wealthier, the poor were getting poorer. And it's one thing for the wealthier to get wealthier legitimately. There's nothing wrong with that. God doesn't care about that. But when the wealthy are doing it on the backs of the poor, and they're doing it by stealing and lying and perverting justice and the laws to do it, that's when God just loses his mind, right? So that's what we see here. So Amos was sent up to the north because of the false worship, which when you introduce that permeates the entire society, which is what has happened up in the north. So the entire social structure. And so then the other issue that God sent him up there for was the lack of justice. The people were just like in a similar way when they were in bondage in Egypt, except here they were in bondage in their own land, right? So the cries of the people came up to God in Egypt, and God responded. Same thing here. The cries of the people in their own land against their own people are coming up to God, and God's responding. So he sent Amos to deal with this. So chapter 6 says, and so it's been awesome. If you read the entire book of Amos, you see him coming against different people, different nations, and now he's addressing Israel. And he's been addressing Israel here for a few chapters. So chapter 6 says, "Woe to you who are at ease in Zion and trust in Mount Samaria, notable persons in the chief nation to whom the house of Israel comes." So when he says, "Those of you who are at ease in Zion and in Mount Samaria," so Zion is another name for Jerusalem. So in that situation, in the very beginning here, he's calling out Judah as well. So he's calling out the southern kingdom as well, even though the focus is mainly on the north. And then trust in Mount Samaria. So Samaria at this time was the capital city of the north. Okay. So notable persons in the chief nation. So, of course, Israel was considered the chief nation. They were called by God. They were God's people. But what's sad is they're considering themselves to be notable persons, right? So their military prowess, their wealth, and their power has turned their hearts so that now they think of themselves as greater than they are. They're no longer humble. They're not seeking God. They're not doing things right. And they consider themselves to be notable persons, right? To whom the house of Israel comes. So they are kind of looking down, right? They're looking down on the other people. These are the people that are in power. Go over to Calneh and see, and from there go to Hamath the great. Then go down to Gath of the Philistines. Are you better than these kingdoms, or is their territory greater than your territory? So there's a couple different views on this in the commentary. So when he says go over to Calneh and see, and Hamath and Gath of the Philistines, so he's telling them to go look at these cities. So these cities were completely corrupted, right? So this is the first view. These cities were completely corrupted, and yet he's saying, look at them. You're no different than them. That's what he's saying. The other view in the commentary was for them, the reason he was telling them to go look at those cities is because they've already been taken over and destroyed. Okay, so they've already, because of their corruption. So go look at those cities. And then he says, are you better than these kingdoms, or is their territory greater than your territory? So either one of those fits. The commentary was divided. Men of great learning went into great detail. We went on and on and on in the commentary about which view. So either one fits. Either one is saying, go look at those cities. You're a mess just like those cities, or you're gonna go into captivity just like those cities, which is what he's talking about here too. So then it says, verse 3, "Woe to you who put far off the day of doom, who cause the seat of violence to come near." So here he's saying, those of you that are saying nothing's going to happen to us, we look at our military, we're so amazing, nothing's going to happen to us. So that's what he's saying there. Woe to you who put far off the day of doom, and who cause the seat of violence to come near. So what they're saying there is they're enthroning violence instead of justice. So it says who cause the seat of violence to come near. So that's basically they're enthroning violence and injustice instead of enthroning righteousness and justice. Verse 4 says, who lie on beds of ivory, stretch out on your couches, eat lambs from the flock and calves from the midst of the stall. So here what he's saying, clearly they're in extreme extravagance, right? You have extremes within the society. So you have this extreme extravagance, and then you have extreme poverty and injustice. And it talked about how the word for lamb here, kareem in the Hebrew, is not the usual word for lamb. So that's denoting some kind of a special delicacy or a certain age of the lamb or a special kind of lamb. So it says, eat lambs from the flock and calves from the midst of the stall. So calves from the midst of the stall also denotes the idea of a calf that is tied up and nothing is done to it but fattening it up for the day of eating it, right? So these are extreme and also people did not eat meat regularly back then. So this was so again, it's just showing the extravagance. And then at verse 5 says, who sing idly to the sounds of stringed instruments and invent for yourselves musical instruments like David. So they have so much time on their hands. They're so bored. They just sing idly to the sound of stringed instruments and invent for themselves musical instruments like David. And then it says, who drink wine from bowls and anoint yourselves with the best ointments. So again, they're not content with drinking wines from cups. They're drinking wine from bowls. That's how much wine they're drinking. And they anoint themselves with the best ointment. So that was common practice. But are not grieved for the affliction of Joseph. So they're not grieved for what they're seeing happening around them. And all of their delicacies and all of the things that they're engaging in are on the backs of the poor and on the backs of injustice, mainly. Therefore they shall now go captive as the first of the captives, and those who reclined at banquets shall be removed. So he's saying here, now they shall go captive as the first of the captives. They're first in the land. They think that they're above everybody, that they're first, that they should be honored the most. So they're going to be honored the most by leading the captives out first. So they're going to be the first in line to be taken captive. Okay, so I'm out of time. So that's number one. Number two is coming. So hold tight. Jesus is coming. Read your Bible. Peace.